No sooner were the ceremonies of the wedding over, but the mother-in-law began to show herself in her true colors. She could not bear the good qualities of this pretty girl, and the less became because they made her own daughters appear the more odious. She employed her in the meanest work of the house. She scoured the dishes, tables, and scrubbed Madam's chamber, and those of Mrs. Her daughters she lay up in sorry garret, upon a wretched straw bed, while her sisters lay in the fine rooms with floors all inlaid upon beds of the very newest fashion, and where they had looking glasses so large that they might see themselves at their full length from head to foot. The poor girl bore all potentially and dared not to tell her father, who would have rattled her off. For his wife governed him entirely. When she had done her work, she used to go into the chimney corner and sit down among cinders and ashes, which made her commonly be called Cinder Wrench. But the youngest, who was not so rude and uncivil as the eldest, called her Cinderella. However, Cinderella, notwithstanding her mean apparel, was 100 times handsomer than her sisters, though they were always dressed very richly. It happened that the king's son gave a ball and invited all people of fashion to it. Our young misses were also invited, for they cut a very grand figure among the quality. They were mightily delighted at the invasion and wonderfully busy in choosing out such gowns, petticoats, and head clothes as might become them. This was a new trouble to Cinderella, for it was she who ironed her sisters' linen and plaited their ruffles. They talked all day long of nothing but how they should be dressed.
For my part,
said the eldest,
I will wear my red velvet suit with French trimming, and I,
said the youngest,
shall have my usual petticoat, but then to make amends for that, I will put on my dress and my diamond stomacher, which is far from being the most ordinary one in the world.
They sent for the best tire woman they could get to make up their head dresses, and adjusted their double piners, and they had their bread bushes and patches from Mademoiselle de la Poche. Cinderella was likewise called up to them to be consulted in all these matters, for she had excelled notions and advised them always for the best, nay, and offered her services to dress their heads, which they were very willing she should do. As she was doing this, they said to her,
Cinderella, you would not be glad to go to the ball. Alas, said
Cinderella,
you only jeer me. It is not for such as I am going to go thither. You, thou art, is the right in the right of it.
Replied the two haughty sisters.
It would make the people laugh to see Cinderwench at the ball.
Anyone but Cinderella would have dressed their heads awry, but she was very, very good and dressed them perfectly well. Well, they were almost 2 days without eating, so much were they transported with joy. They broke above a dozen laces and trying to be laced up close, that they might have a fine, slender shape. And they were continually at their looking glass. At last, the happy day came. They went to court, and Cinderella followed them with her eyes as long as she could. And when she had lost sight of them, she fell a-crying. Her grandmother, who saw her all in tears, asked her what was the matter.
I wish I could. I wish I could.
She was not able to speak the rest, being interrupted by her tears and sobbing. This godmother of hers, who was a fairy, said to her,
Thou wishest thou couldst go to the ball, is it not so? Yes, cried
Cinderella with a great sigh.
Well,
Said her godmother,
be but a good girl, and I will contrive that thou shalt go.
Then she took Cinderella into her chamber and said to her,
Run into the garden and bring me a pumpkin.
Cinderella went immediately to gather the finest she could get and brought it to her godmother, not being able to imagine how this pumpkin could make her go to the ball. Her godmother scooped out all the inside of it, having left nothing but the ride, which done, she struck it with her wand, and the pumpkin was instantly turned into a fine coach, gilded all over with gold. Cinderella's godmother then went to look into her mousetrap, and where she found 6 mice all alive, and ordered Cinderella to lift up a little the trapdoor. Then, giving each mouse as it went out a little tap with her wand, the mouse that was that moment turned into a fine horse, which altogether made a very fine set of 6 horses of a beautiful mouse-colored dapple gray, being at a loss for a coachman.
I will go and see,
said Cinderella.
If there is never a rat, the top rat, in the rat trap, we may make a coachman of him. Thou art in the right,
replied her godmother.
Go and look.
Cinderella brought the trap to her, and in it were the 3 huge rats. The fairy made choice of one of the 3 which had the largest beard, and having touched him with her wand, he was turned into a fat, jolly coachman, who had the smartest whiskered eyes ever beheld. After that, she said to Cinderella,
Go again into the garden, and you will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. Bring them to me.
Cinderella had no sooner done but her godmother turned them into 6 footmen, who skipped up immediately behind the coach with their livery all bedaubed with gold and silver, and clung as close behind each other as if they had done nothing else their whole lives. The fairy then said to Cinderella,
Well, you see here an equipage fit to go to the ball with. Are you not pleased with it? Oh, yes.
cried she, but when she continued sorrowfully,
But must I go thither as I am in these nasty rags?
her godmother only just touched her with her wand, and at the same instant her clothes were turned into cloth of gold and silver, all beset with jewels. This done, she gave her a pair of glass slippers. She, the prettiest in the whole world, being thus decked out, she got into her coach, but her godmother, above all things, commanded her not to stay till after midnight, telling her at the same time that if she stayed one moment longer, the coach would be a pumpkin again, her horses mice, her coachman a rat, her footmen lizards, and her clothes became just as they were before. Cinderella promised her godmother she would be not fail of leaving the ball before midnight, and then away the drivers, scarce able to contain herself for joy. The king's son, who was told to that everybody knew was come, ran out to receive her. She gave her his hand as she alighted out of the coach, and led her into the ball. Among all the company there was immediately a profound silence. They left off dancing, and the violins ceased to play. So attentive was everyone to complete the singular beauties of the unknown newcomer. Nothing was then heard but a confused noise of, "Ha! How handsome she is! Ha! How handsome she is!" The king himself, old as he was, could not help watch her, and telling the queen softly that it was a long time since he had seen so beautiful and lovely of a creature. All the ladies were busied in considering her clothes and headdress that they might have some made next door, after the same pattern, provided they could meet with such fine material and as able hands to make them. The king's son conducted her to the most honorable seat, and afterward took her out to dance with him. She danced so very gracefully that they all more and more admired her. A fine collation was served up. However, the young prince ate not a morsel, so intently was he busied and gazing on her. Cinderella went and sat down by her sisters, showing them 1,000 civilities, giving them part of the oranges and citron which the prince had presented her with, which very much surprised them, for they had not known her. While Cinderella was thus amusing her sisters, she heard the clock strike 11. They made a courtesy to the company and hasted away as fast as she could.
Pause there. Skip down, Boston. I want you to find, it's the next super fat paragraph, and it says the next day the two sisters were at the ball. It's almost at the very bottom of this page.
Okay.
Let's just skip to that part. The next couple of paragraphs will change the story.
Next day, two sisters are at the ball, and so was Cinderella, but dressed more magnificently than before. The king's son was always by her, and never caused his compliments and king speeches to her, to whom all this was so far from being tiresome that she quite forgot what her godmother had recommended to her, so that she at last counted the clock striking 12. When she took it to be no more than 11, she then rose up and fled as nimble as a deer. The prince followed, but could not overtake her. She left behind one of her glass slippers, which the prince took up most carefully. She got home, but quiet, out of breath, and in her nasty old clothes, having nothing left her of all her finery but one of the little slippers fellow to that she dropped. The guards to the palace gate were asked if they had not seen a princess go out. They said they had seen nobody go out but a young girl, very meanly dressed, and who had more the air of a poor country wench than a gentleman. When the two sisters returned from the ball, Cinderella asked them if they had been well diverted and if the fine lady had been there.
Yes,
They told her,
but she hurried away immediately when it struck 12, and with so much haste that she dropped one of her little glass slippers, the prettiest in the world, which the king's son took up. He had nothing but look at her all the time at the ball, and most certainly he is very much in love with the beautiful person who owns the glass slipper.
what they said was very true. For a few days after the king's son caused it to be proclaimed by a sound of trumpet that he would marry whose foot the slipper would just fit.
And most certainly he is very much in love with the beautiful person who owns the glass slipper.
What they said was very true. For a few days after the king's son caused it to be proclaimed by a sound of trumpet that he would marry whose foot the slipper would just